OCO, and welcome to the Cherokee Phoenix Breakdown. I am Tyler Thomas, the Executive Editor of the Cherokee Phoenix, and I am joined today by Cherokee Nation Language Department Executive Director Howard Paden, as well as Cherokee Nation Language Program Manager Roy Boney. In this episode, we will discuss the history of the Cherokee Syllabary and the tribe's plan to celebrate its 200th anniversary of its creation. Mr. Paden, Mr. Boney, thank you for joining me today.
Well, we're glad to be here.
As you both know, 2021 marks the 200th anniversary of Sequoia creating the Cherokee written language. Mr. Boney, can you briefly give me some background on Sequoia's development of the syllabary and his efforts to get it adopted by the tribe?
Yeah, the general story is that as a young man, he was in war, and he noticed that some people were writing letters home, and he wondered, why can we not do that? So he set out to develop a writing system, and he started off trying to do like a one picture for every word, but decided that was too difficult to do. So roughly between 1809 and 1821, he developed a system. He had different versions of it, variations. In some of the stories, they say that his wife destroyed some of it, burned it. He had to start from scratch. And basically, he settled on the system after lots of years of study. And there's also oral stories too that say he was reviving a formerly lost writing system as well. That's, some people dispute that, but that's also part of the story too.
So he gets it adopted in 2020, or gets it developed and then adopted in 2021. What was the process of him getting it adopted?
Well, if you think about it, there's kind of a long process because initially he had to develop it was cursive at first, it was handwritten. And so there's this version of it that's very cursive-like. And as it was slowly modified for the printing press, so it went through these modifications. So there's a period roughly from 1821 to 1827 where the writing system, it was evolving from handwriting to print. And in order to get the tribe to adopt it, they did a test. The National Council brought him in and his daughter, and they made them do the test where they wrote on a piece of paper a message, and they had her go out the room and read it, and he replied back. And that's how they knew that, well, this thing really works. And from there, the tribe officially adopted it as a writing system of the Cherokee people.
Mr. Paden, you've studied linguistics and you've been over the Cherokee Language Master Apprentice program. Can you tell our audience how difficult and truly remarkable Sequoia's achievement was?
Well, Tyler, as you know, we have been involved in this for quite some time. Of course, I haven't really done a lot of formal study of linguistics. It's been more of folks that's been around us, that like the Durbin Villains, that has offered that to us. It may be in their office, it may be different places, but it wasn't in front of a Harvard type institute. But I will tell you that it's truly remarkable what he was able to achieve. He studied most written languages. Some of them have to adapt, and it takes decades or maybe a couple centuries to get as nailed down as well as Sequoia was able to write our language. And so what is neat about that is it kind of puts some things in stone where we would not have, we're not going to have near the language decay that we would have had if it hadn't been for Sequoia, because Mr. Boney and I and some others have went around the different libraries around the U.S. that has large collections, and some of these things are written in the early to mid 1800s that we are now looking bringing that in and bringing it in front of the speakers, and we're developing plans right now to build a large language corpus that will allow us to feed that information in and bring it before speakers now to say, okay, these are words we may not recognize now, that may not be really spoken in our modern language, but can you fill in some of these gaps. And that will allow us to bring back words that hasn't been spoken maybe in 100 years or 50 years. So these are, it's interesting times. We're definitely in a unique situation, and we're glad that we are that we have the information that Sequoia allowed for us and provided for us to be able to better secure our language. So.
Mr. Boney, how has the syllabary evolved since its creation?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, it went from a process as handwriting cursive to a printing press. And so from that time, it evolved even further. So every major form of writing technology has been developed for syllabary. So you got a printing press, then you have typewriters, and you have word processors, and you got the fonts for desktop publishing now, and you can text. And so it's made the jump from every form of new evolution of technology since its introduction.
Mr. Paden, in recent years, the tribe has placed a concentrated effort in language revitalization. What are some of the monumental programs or initiatives that the tribe has or are currently doing to grow the language?
It's interesting. We have a few things that's working in tandem with one another. One thing we're wanting to save the language as a living language, where we don't have generations from now that's just trying their best to piecemeal stuff together. We don't want it to ever die. So building that living language and continue that on is really, really important. And one feeds into the other. But another thing we're doing is trying to make sure that that things are documented, and it's not just language revitalization, but it's a certain amount of language maintenance and saving some of these things. So that's why we're doing two things at once. One is focusing on documenting all the things, putting it in a place that's searchable, stuff that's been written, has been spoken, has been videoed, has been taped, and building what we actually have as far as living right now as well. So, but some of the things that we really like to showcase is that we have the translations department that has been working for years and years now, that has given us a large amount of Cherokee and secured it in a way that is understandable, and it also has been secured in the way of writing it just a certain way and documenting what that means. Of course, the Master Apprentice program, is a wonderful program. We're excited that it brings second language speakers up to a certain level that we hadn't been able to accomplish or achieve before, recent years, not as a nation. So now it may have happened in individual families and that sort of thing, but as far as the Cherokee Nation formally coming in and building something like that, it hasn't happened. So in the immersion school is good. What is good about that now is that we're able to look at the immersion school and see where we came from and what the goals are that we're going to want to achieve in the near future when it comes to our kiddos. So we're working, as you know, right now to build a baby immersion. So the immersion school starts at 3 years old. This baby immersion starts a kiddo at 6 weeks old, and it will one day feed right into the immersion school. So where you have a group of kids coming in at 3 that's having to learn sounds, that will already be accomplished in baby immersion before they get there. We're also kind of paying close attention to saying, okay, how many can be added when's the saturation? So if you have a block of students that are speaking Cherokee, obviously if you bring a block of non-Cherokee speaking students in there, they can easily take over um, that that language area and make it into English, Um, but if you are able to add one or two to a certain percentage, the kids will help grow that child that you're adding to that. So at what age, how often can you do that? What's the percentages are all the things we're studying. But to speak about some new programs that I'm really excited about. One is the Elder Grant is what we're calling the Elder Grant. It's actually written as the Institute of Excellency or Institute of Excellence. And what it does is it takes a group of elder speakers, around 8 elder speakers, and it pairs them with a group of 40 or 50-year-old speakers. And they concentrate on language that they don't necessarily have at this point. So so if there is you say you have a language goes from 1 to 10, and if a 40, 50-year-old speaker is speaking a level 7 language, and we have 80 and 90-year-olds that are speaking a level 10, then putting them together will hopefully foster a place where there's a higher level of learning for them first language speakers that are 40 and 50. So we may end up with a 9 or a 10 level speaker that will allow us to secure that higher register of language until the rest of us can kind of catch up. So we're using that program to kind of punt the ball a little bit to get closer to a place that it allows us to add 20 years or whatever when it comes to trying to save that higher register language. And the second one is Teacher Bridge, that brings someone that's graduated from the Master Apprentice program or first language speakers, and it puts 2 more years onto that individual, and it focuses on meta language, like the linguistic terms. Right now, we're translating all of that into Cherokee instead of talking about Cherokee in English. This will allow us to talk about Cherokee in Cherokee. So all the meta language that we're studying linguistically and also from classroom management and all that is going to be transferred to Cherokee and will be taught for a period of 2 years in the Teacher Bridge, which will add additional 2 years to the Master Apprentice. So we're hoping that we hit a higher level. What we're calling the ACTFL standard is where people graduate Master Apprentice right now is like advanced low. We're trying to hit advanced mid or advanced high after they graduate the Teacher Bridge. So it's really exciting times. So
Mr. Boney, you mentioned it a little bit earlier about the tribe's growth through the digital age. Can you just kind of expound on that? I know you've been very instrumental in that process.
Yeah, where we are now, we owe a huge gratitude for many things to Durbin Filling. He passed away recently, but the groundwork he laid, allowed us to get here. So back in the mid 90s, Durbin worked with Dr. Gloria Sly and a gentleman named Michael Everson to make this application to the Unicode Consortium. And what that means is Unicode is the international standard for all computing devices that regulates how written languages are displayed on screens and things. So like if you use an ATM, it's using Unicode. If you're using a laptop, whatever digital device it is that has writing on it, it has to go through this process to make sure that the characters are displayed properly. And so if your language isn't in Unicode, your language won't be displayed on these devices. So Durbin had the foresight to hey, let's make this application to this group. And so that was in the mid 90s. We didn't get approval until about the year 2000 or so. And so at that point, that's when the computers were, the coding itself was in there for Cherokee Syllabary to be in it. But then it took a few years after that for our community itself to realize that. So in the meantime, we were making, people in our community were making different fonts and things in Cherokee. But the problem was because they were all different, they could not communicate with each other. They weren't consistent across the board. So if you didn't have a proper font, you sent somebody a document, it wouldn't show up properly and all. So we had all these problems. So when Unicode was standardized with the Cherokee Syllabary as with its own code point range, that allowed it to become more standardized. So you could write Cherokee on your smartphone or your computer or whatever, and it would be guaranteed to be sent correctly to another device without you worrying how that font would display. So when we got that in place, it started off pretty used quite a lot in the immersion school at the time. And from there, it just kept spreading to the communities. And now we have it where most people do have access to the Cherokee Syllabary on any of the devices. If they have a smartphone, now it doesn't really matter which brand, they can see Syllabary on it, and they can download keyboards from app stores that allow them to type in Cherokee. They have their options now, and on the Apple devices, there's the keyboards on them already. So the same thing with Windows, and for like Android, you have to go to the store and download things. But there's any option that you want, you can write in Cherokee now on your digital device. And with that has brought a lot more literacy among our people. We are still struggling between that concept of literacy and speaking, but this is helping bridge that gap, and especially with our elders in the community. Some of them, they are able to communicate with their grandchildren in Syllabary. So that's really neat to see that starting to happen. So you have these master speakers that can send message to their grandkids or even their own children in the language now. So it's getting everyone to get learning it more.
That's amazing. Mr. Paden, I'm not sure how in detail you can go, but how's the tribe going to celebrate this 200th anniversary for the creation of the Syllabary?
Mr. Thomas, as you know, how things happen pre-COVID and how things happen post-COVID, or at least during COVID, is two different things. But I do know that we was really planning another Cherokee speakers meeting, like how we had at the Heritage Center in September 2019. There was a large group of speakers, as you know, that was able to celebrate our language with us, and I think it was about 500 or 600 that showed up, and I think probably 1,100 people total was there that day. And it's a large giveaway, a lot of singing, and a lot of talking Cherokee. And I think you and I mentioned just a little bit while we was waiting on Roy to come that we never dreamed that that speaker role would be so vital in getting our speaking population in for vaccination and that sort of thing. So it happened just in the nick of time. But we're hoping that when this starts to calm down, we can have something like that. And I'm hoping that by the time that we are finished building the new Durbin-Fillin Language Center, that will be an awesome time to have a meeting like that, and that would work in tandem with this celebration of the 200 years since the Syllabary began. So we'll be celebrating a lot of things this year. I do know that it won't be very long that we have speakers moving into the speaker village, just right next door, and I know that there's other groups that's working with us, CMB and the Heritage Center and that sort of thing, to bring some stuff out when it comes to this celebration about the 200 years anniversary of our written language. And they've been meeting with Roy and I and different ones for a little while to do some planning. So I don't know what all we can say, what all we can't, but I do know that it's going to be a interesting year to celebrate, but we definitely have to celebrate it the best we can.
Yeah. Mr. Boney, I know it's kind of impossible to truly know the answer to this question, but in your opinion, what do you think Sequoia would think if he saw the system that he developed back in 1821 being utilized to the extent that it's utilized today in 2021?
Well, I would hope that he'd be very proud to see that something he made has endured and that Cherokee still use it. And I think for a lot of Cherokees, there's a lot of disagreements, a lot of stuff about Cherokee culture and history and politics or whatever. But one of the things that brings everyone together is the syllabary. Everyone sees that and recognizes that as Cherokee, and everyone celebrates that. So I think that's a good testament to the work that Sequoia did. And I truly think he would be very proud to see it being used still.
All right. Mr. Paden, is there anything more you'd like to offer before we end today's discussion?
I will say that we have a awesome team that has come together to help revitalize our language and maintain it. So we're trying our best to not have, as a tribe, not to have language decay or the minimum amount as we possibly can. I would hate the idea of having 100, 200 years from now a language that speakers don't fully recognize now, that are with us now. So we're working around the clock to try to make sure that we save the highest registrar language that we possibly can, and that it's not fossilized. That although we want to maintain what we have, there is new concept. Cherokees are living in a different world now, and there's a process of building these words and these concepts to the modern age. And language technology, some of these groups that have worked around the clock to do projects like Microsoft and the idea that daily I get a text message that's just in Cherokee. Could you imagine bringing a phone? If you could bring Sequoia to 2021 and you show him a phone and you're able to use his system to contact another speaker instantaneously, 100 miles away. I don't think he understood what we was going to use his information for. And it's a good thing. I mean, we've got challenges, but I have no doubt that the team that is around us is going to step up to this challenge. And I see a inspiring group of Cherokees that are coming forward. I'm also seeing the world that we're living in, and the speakers that are with us now. They haven't always felt like they was considered sacred and special. And the idea of, hey, we're doing the language village, speakers, we're going to vaccinate you among the first. You're important to us. I think them sort of things is going to bring people from our communities out to stand beside us that we desperately need right now. So our language partners are coming together to stand beside us, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Outside of, the development and implementation, whenever he developed it, I think we're at a point in history where you have the greatest opportunity to grow it, because the language has survived the extermination policy, the assimilation, all that, to where now you can put considerable resources into the growing of the language efforts. So I think you are right that you're going to see some remarkable progress from here on out. Mr. Boney, anything to add before we conclude?
No, I just want to go back to, Sequoia would be amazed at what he's seeing. And according to some scholarship, there were roughly 13 million pages of Cherokee text made during the 19th century. And so without his invention, there'd be a lot of ideas and terminology that we wouldn't have now in terms of the language, because our translators will refer to those old documents that have those old words. And so with what's happening with that, we're doing that again. As Howard mentioned, the new concepts are being developed by our Cherokee Consortium group, and they're writing these things down in Syllabary. So they're continuing this train of thought and experience that we wouldn't have otherwise without the writing system.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to expound on that, I mean, we wouldn't possibly be doing what we're doing here today on this virtual chat, because the Cherokee Phoenix may not exist to any extent without the development of the syllabary. So you can see its impact on so many levels. All right, Mr. Paden, Mr. Boney, thank you for joining me today and discussing the history of the Cherokee Syllabary, the tribe's language revitalization efforts, and the tribe's plan to celebrate its 200th anniversary of the creation of the Syllabary. I also want to thank our audience for watching this episode of the Cherokee Phoenix Breakdown, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to catch our next episode. What up?
Enjoy the lead, just see. Tyler.
Thank you.